Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again. I must conserve every bit of strength that I can. But we have a wonderful show for you tonight. I know you're going to enjoy it.
Welcome back to Cannabis. Welcome back to Cannabis Canada with Jason Wilcox. We apologize to everybody for being late. It's technical difficulties, still trying to get this live show off the ground and get everything going. And I've got a lot of ranting and raving to do, a lot of talking to do, and a great guest tonight to do it with. But first, I'd like to open up by just warning all medical patients out there of Health Canada's legislation that they passed yesterday with the Section 56 exemption and the subclause that's in that exemption, which I think is very important. I should have it written out here. But that subsection actually says an authorized person must not use organic solvents when they are altering the chemical or physical properties of fresh or dried marijuana or product described in paragraph C above. So basically no BHO, RSO, basically water extractions, maybe some homemade butter cookies. That's kind of your limitations. You get caught with some slabs of dabs, quite frankly, there's Bill C-10 waiting for you. I believe that's a ways away before they would try and do that. I believe Health Canada will send out a letter informing everybody of exactly what they've announced, and that to me is quite frankly scary for the medical patients of Canada who have been supplying themselves and have a constitutional right to supply themselves as they see fit, and for Health Canada to legislate this after 13 years of allowing, or 14 years of allowing us to do it as we wish, I think is another very another good example of the failed and flawed policy, and once unconstitutional policy that is now, I guess, constitutional again because of the Section 56 exemption for the LPs. On that little bit of a note, it's been a rant. I got 1 hour to go here with a 10-minute break. So, Jamie Shaw, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Jamie Shaw is you're the president of the CMACD?
Yeah.
Yes, president of the CMACD and also a board spokesperson.
Spokesperson for the BC Compassion Club.
For the BC Compassion Club Society. Yeah. And it's Jamie. You wear two hats and two very important hats that tie into a lot of the questions. There's been a lot of questions that have come to me. There's a lot of things people don't necessarily understand, and most importantly, it would be about how did CD get involved with, I'm just going to come right out with it. Sorry, for those that have watched this, Jamie's been on the show before, and we've done the background, we've done everything, but for the purpose of time and discussion, we're just going to jump right into this. If you want to see more, just check out the channel and Google our names, and you'll pull up the previous shows.
Actually, if you don't mind, I'd like to actually comment on what your opening rant was about.
Sure.
There's an interesting thing, even before you get to C10, the day R versus Smith came out, Health Canada and the federal government announced that they want to actually increase the scope of the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act to make the production of derivatives to be equal to that of methamphetamine. So now if you're caught with your slab of dabs, they consider that equal to methamphetamines. What's weird is with the mandatory minimums that they brought in a couple of years ago, actually that weight in cookies would have the same penalty as that weight in concentrates, in shatter or wax.
So in shatter, that would be what? I can't remember off the top of my head. I know it's at least 2 to 5 years or something mandatory for just a small slab.
And it's by weight. So one cookie probably weighs more than that, so you would end up doing more time based off of that.
And that's true. Did they actually say that patients can't make because it's funny, like in that legislation it says you can't use the solvents now, but it doesn't say you can't do water, and I don't know if they can't consider butter a chemical solvent. So making cookies, I think with butter you could get away with. But you're right, the shatter guys, and I'm sorry out there guys, but this is what they legislated, and I'm telling you the trifecta was when the Conservative Party put in Bill C-10, which would have you do mandatory minimums for 6 or more plants if you grow, and now any extracts, and including medical patients under injunction and or MMPR. It don't matter. Even worse if you're under the MMPR, because you have to have it in a child protective container, and it has to be from an LP. Very strict and stringent regulations around what the LP monopoly now gets to have. Now they got full and absolute control over the oils. And I'd like to jump on this, Jamie. The oils. Now, when the City Hall first announces, I've talked about this on CannabisCanada.ca, and I made sure this was addressed because we all found it odd. Why were they restricting just oils, no edibles? I called it. After seeing the LP game, after seeing your monopoly guys, I said the oils is what's going to be the actual legislation of R versus Smith. Before they even, this is how, I really believe that this is not, I believe the city is in tune with regulating dispensaries and producing that patients need it, and we know this, but at the same time, I believe the end game is to have that same monopoly control BC cannabis through their dispensing models.
I would hope not. I mean, part of the whole thing of the dispensing industry in the first place is it doesn't lend itself to that, right? Like, we are all pretty mavericks. We all kind of do things our own way. That's actually one of the reasons why when we came up with the CAMCD standards, they're actually just like basic things that we think you should be doing, but it's not even how you do it. Like, we think you should have a policy around accepting visitors, or you should have a policy around medical documentation. But what that is really up to the individual dispensary. And part of that is because this is an industry that's been about innovation. Like, the patients have gained the greatest ground when there's been innovation. When the first few dispensaries started, it was mostly cannabis. There may have been some hash every once in a while. But as patients needed more edibles, there's been more and more innovation from different dispensaries, not just those old ones. And so that to us is a big important part of local distribution models, right? Yeah. And that's kind of where we're hoping that the dispensaries will ultimately fit into the Canadian model. The licensed producers, we don't feel are ever going away. Those are now the big companies that are there. Whether they transition to recreational when they can, or keep doing medicals, a different question.
That they've been set up for recreational, and of course Rona has confirmed that there is no medical value to marijuana. As I've said for over 2 years, there's no medical value in Canada. So this is a hypocrisy in a democracy.
Well, they don't want to do it. I mean, that's why they've been so petulant from the beginning, right? They're going to make it as difficult as they possibly can because they don't want to do it. They don't think anybody else should do it, and they don't really care what the courts say. That actually is one of the things that I found personally really offensive about this. I haven't even had a chance to pore over those regulations in detail yet, but just the simple fact that they just went, oh, Section 56, here's a couple new rules, go nuts, right? And it's just like, it shows an unbelievable lack of care for patients, a lack of care for people that actually, some of them left the dispensary world, right? They actually them and fix it up and help it, and you and I and other patients knew immediately that system wasn't going to work, not without major revisions, not without the inclusion of things like personal growing. So all of these arbitrary and unnecessary restrictions literally just hold things up. So now that's going to be in place until there's another court date, because there's not going to be any other way to change it unless we get a new government and they change it.
Well, we can also change it the way we always do, through the Constitution. Unfortunately, it's another $250,000 to once again.
Well, that's what I mean. It's the courts.
Reasonable access.
Exactly.
I believe that it infringes upon reasonable access, and I'm sure the lawyers would agree. But that's another discussion. So now, at what point did CAMCD? Because there was a revision in the regulations that, of course, we reported the drop. Did CAMCD get engaged with the city of Vancouver as a third party?
Well, we've been engaged from the beginning, right? It was Adolfo Gonzalez, when he was at Eden, him and I wrote that report, Civic Policy of Marijuana Dispensaries, and basically, after our meetings we got nowhere with the federal government. We got nowhere with the provincial government. We started meeting with some of the municipal officials, great support amongst some departments, no support at all amongst others. So we started going to the councillors, and when we started doing that, we realized that most of us had been saying the wrong thing for years. We have been talking about the medical benefits of cannabis and the needs of patients, and what we discovered was they knew that. They already knew that. They already believed that. What they actually needed was some sort of an impetus to actually do something, even though it's not going up against the federal government. So that report it also went to Victoria, and so they started looking at it, and I think you can find it on our website actually. It basically lays out case studies of cities like Berkeley, San Francisco, Oakland, where they moved to regulate dispensaries very quickly. They've got excellent models that are very accountable to patients. Berkeley requires free cannabis given to patients on low income.
Well, who supplies the Berkeley clubs, though? Does a big LP supply the Berkeley clubs?
Not at all, of course not. They're the model that BC had before the LPs and the feds basically started getting involved. Right?
So that's my concern. So CAMCD, were they approached by the city, or who solicited?
Well, no, so it was us asking them to regulate, not telling them exactly what to do or how to do it, just saying you have to. opposite experience as those other 3 dispensaries because they didn't regulate. We were pointing out the growth of dispensaries, and they sat on it still for a while. I don't know if there was like movement or discussion, but once the growth really started to kind of happen exponentially the way we said it would, then I think they really started taking it seriously. Once they actually accepted that, so we had no contact other than with councillors telling them they had to do it. Then once it went to public hearing, there was no contact at all, but city staffers were calling and asking questions and things like that. But there's no kind of direct involvement that way. So when we saw the amendments, we didn't know either. And we actually think it's a good thing, but the in those regulations is that Compassion Club license is great for compassion clubs, but there's other medical dispensaries that aren't necessarily compassion clubs that are still very medical, that are still giving back to their communities in other ways. Vancouver Dispensary is a perfect example. Eden runs the methadone replacement program. That's huge, right? And so that was what we were fighting for. We were fighting for all the oldest dispensaries to be able to stay where they were. Everyone with a good reputation that gets along with their neighborhoods. Why move them?
Well, hold on. That leads me right into my next thing here, because it says in the Globe and Mail dated July 6th that reported compassion clubs may get to stay despite Vancouver's new dispensary rules. The BCCS have been there 18 years, and they cannot compete with the overheated real estate that everybody you can't compete with, and therefore yourself and others. No, Dana Larson is also noted as seeking to himself bypass the regulations if you have it, so he doesn't have to move his locations. So now, because in Dana's case, he's in that 300-meter strike rule, so is he also applying to have that?
Well, we don't know. So what that's all about is actually it's just the process that's in place for if you apply for any city license to run a corner store. If you get turned down, there's an appeal process to the Board of Variance. So that's what they were talking about. That's it, yes. But there's no guarantee. We have to go and make our case to the Board of Variance. We feel we have a very good case, but we felt that during the public hearings as well, right? Yeah. So how that turns out remains. Put everything in that basket. Like, we can't just tell our members, oh, well, you know, the board will agree and let us stay, and then not have a backup plan. So, I mean, it's an option. It's nice, but there's certainly no guarantee. And if it turns out we don't get it, then everybody's in trouble, right?
Well,
and so we have to plan.
Went on record as saying the British Columbia Compassion Club Society, Mr. Larson, as well as Eden's, is in fact going to get the first permits in BC.
Well, I don't know about that. We don't even have our application in yet, so I don't think that's going to be an issue.
It's just a source, but it's the same source that let us know it dropped from $30,000 down to $1,000, which we reported. I wish I knew this the night before. That's good news. I would have to work a lot less if that was the case. Well, this is true, and this is where, you know, I'm looking forward to this. And to our audience, I mean, anybody who wants to engage Jamie or myself into questions around this for dispensaries, there's 94 dispensaries. If you're wondering, well, how can you fit into this, and how does CAMCD play into this, we're going to get into all this stuff, and we're certainly looking to take questions from the audience. But now, on that note here, let's just say you meet all the compliance, and you continue to do what you're supposed to, and they give you that 300-meter elimination, everything else. If they came to you and said, now we learned that medical patients are not a legal supply for a compassion club, and only licensed producers such as Tilray and Tweed are, would you sell their cannabis at the British Columbia Compassion Club Society?
No. I mean, frankly, our model wouldn't even be sustainable. No, it wouldn't be sustainable, right? Like, I mean, we work with our growers on a contract basis, so it has nothing to do with market value or anything else. They are also taking the same cuts that staff are taking, right? We're not there to make money. We're there for the members, and we're there to make that run. That's the only reason we're able to offer as many health services as we are, and why it's difficult for other dispensaries to do so, especially if they're buying off of the general market. There's a lot of designated producers and people that have been growing for, this is British Columbia, there's people that have been growing for 30 or 40 years.
I think I'm member number 87 at the club, just so you know. I did Providence going back with Hillary at the old club.
So there's different models, but ultimately the thing is, if you look at the prices that they're selling it at, I mean, even before you get into any quality issues, I don't like the idea of irradiating cannabis. we understand that that's done with a lot of food products and a lot of medicines, but for us, we believe that if the plant isn't healthy, it probably shouldn't be used for medicine, right? If you have to irradiate it to get rid of things, then...
What's your take? I want to get this officially so everybody knows this, because my take is this is just ridiculous, but save the kids, and I don't want my Caleb, one of my writers, going nuts here over this, but save the kids, packaging 30 milligrams of oil, safely, child-proof packaging. This, again, is more arbitrary, just... platforms to trying to actually get what is no lethal dose medicine, and they don't want to recognize it as medicine. So holistic herb.
It's a bit of a... There's people that are crushing up codeine and mixing it with cough syrup, and that's what they're drinking at the parties now. That's not, that maybe should be what you're a little bit more worried about. Bath salts, maybe, right?
I often say the drugs in mom and dad's cupboard, the beer in the fridge. These are the entry drugs. You put cannabis in there. What would you do if you don't want your kid taking your oxycodone? You lock it up. You do the same damn thing with your cannabis if you don't want your kid smoking it, because you know what? They can get it at school just as easy. This is the reality that BC faces.
Apparently they can't anymore. It was interesting.
Who says that?
The
My daughter would challenge
Institute,
that.
The McCreary Institute did. They're in charge of the health surveys. And back in April, I was able to do a panel with them for the Vancouver School Board, and they had announced their health survey. And 10 years ago, when there were about 35 dispensaries in all of Canada, the cannabis usage rate amongst under 17 in cannabis was 35%. Last year when they did it, it's 17% with 94 dispensaries in town. So there's this weird, and when they've asked questions about why they thought that was, it was harder to get. And it's not surprising because, even when people complain that there's some dispensaries in town that aren't medical, there aren't. There are some that are not that medical, but frankly, they are still diverting traffic from the street. If there's a problem with a moldy product or a tainted product, you can say, I got it right there at that spot. There's something that public health officials can do about it.
Well,
right?
even my daughter says kids don't even try to go to dispensaries because they can get it at the corner street dealer on Granville. Just a reality that kids have at their option in any given city, and they don't go to clubs where it's adults and they're going to get carded and etc. and proper things are followed.
And frankly, like with us, with the school across the street, they don't think it's cool. We have another dispensary that's just a little about a block down on the other side of the street. And about a week ago, I saw these two kids coming by from the school, and one of them was like, you should go buy medical marijuana, and was pushing him into the dispensary, and he was going, no, because they see the people that go in and out of the dispensary. That's not, it's not the cool image you used to see on cigarette packs, right? Especially in the more purely medical dispensaries. It's not something that's attractive to kids, unless you make it attractive.
Now, as president of the CAMCD, I got to ask you the hardball question. Does this not set you up to be a monopoly over what is a compassion club and what isn't in British Columbia? I mean, it's a hard question, but it's the reality that the city and yourselves have postured up to be in. And I'd like to call the city out on it. I'd like to just get your opinion on it as well. Not so much call you out, but find out more. How did this happen and why? And I just don't understand the third-party nonprofit.
I think what happened was during my testimony at the public hearing, they had been asking specifically for a definition of a compassion club, and I gave them that definition, but then I also gave them the definition of a medical dispensary that was also giving back, that would be included under CAMCD, for example. There's only 2 compassion clubs in CAMCD, so that's not our goal, is to just promote that one model. But then when I explained the medical dispensaries and then the more recreational ones, that seemed to be where the blur. So they realized they were blurring all of this stuff together, and they drew a line. We just think they drew it a little too far to one side. We don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that, although to the best of my knowledge, that's the first legal definition of a compassion club in Canada in terms of like regulations or anything else. Well, it's not what we would define it as.
But if the CMACD has sole proprietor over business licenses, basically, with the city of Vancouver, then they become sort of a monopoly.
Jump. Yeah, no, that's kind of a jump. There's a couple of different things here. First,
for only compassion club models, sorry. I know,
yes, exactly,
I'm excluding but I don't think there's going to be a lot of for-profits allowed. I really don't. I don't think the monopoly is going to allow it.
I don't know. We'll have to see what
they'll
happens.
They'll allow their clinics, like in St. Catharines, Ontario. Look at St. Catharines, Ontario. There's an LP clinic that's dispensing on the ground. Pop a doctor in, pick up your prescription 2 days later, or have it mailed to your house. That's how they operate.
There's a few other things to remember here too, though, right? It's like, the $30,000 fee is kind of a big chunk, but that one is going to come down. They've said for sure that's coming down. And if you look at the way bylaw fees are structured, they're not supposed to make money. They're supposed to be revenue neutral. So that fee will come down. So, I mean, what we don't want to see right now is a whole bunch of people trying to become compassion clubs, right? That's not what we want. We don't want people joining our certification program because it's for their business license.
To be fair,
right?
like
That's not what we want at all.
to be fair, as the BCCS has pointed out, and as you just rightfully said, it's an overheated marketplace.
Yeah.
The 94 clubs, and we've shown how 75 or 80% of them knock each other out. You have to move. Well, there's an overheated marketplace. So moving is not something that's really going to be so easy to do, let alone, as you said, remodeling and trying to
For the last 2
become a
years,
compassion
everybody's
club.
been looking for any available space in town to rent one, right? And that's already, and now with the regulations written, there's probably a lot of people that were on the fence that are now thinking, well, maybe now I'll do it, right? So yeah, that is going to be a big issue. But
Well, that's why I'm glad you shared how is it that just so we can share this with the other clubs so it's fair, how is it that they go about what you and Dana are doing for your clubs to be able to seek I don't know what you would call it, but
well, it's basically just if you get turned down for the license, you appeal, right? That's
right, but
the city
you're
process.
seeking for like you have Providence, you're near a school, but you're so you're asking like, hey, we have these removed because of our good standing, because of the good nature?
What'll end up happening is we'll apply, even though we know we probably don't qualify, and then when it gets turned down, we will be able to appeal, and then we'll have to make our case. But like I said, we've been making our case, right? For 18 years, we've been making our case. So it's not a guarantee, even for us, and so it's not really a guarantee for anybody. So I would think, if you can move, my advice would be, if you can move, then move. But it's going to be very difficult right now. And as I said, the older dispensaries, obviously they have a case. Somebody that opened a few months ago might have a harder time in front of the Board of Variance, but we don't even know if the oldest. So that's that part of that. I also wanted to just get back quick to the standards, the CAMCD standards. One of the things that's really important to realize too is that it's a certification program. Had anybody else cared enough about what standards other people were selling to patients, they could have done it. When it was founded, it was 9 of the earliest dispensaries. When there was like 35 maybe across the country, there was 9 of us.
I was a big supporter of the VIX when I was on the island as well.
It was a big chunk of the industry at the time. Half of them have now like closed or gone because of all the transition through the MMPR and everything else. So it's certainly being revitalized right now. But it was a program that was set up for years, going over all their policies and certifying and everything else. The trade association membership is something that we just created back in May, which was meant to make it a lot easier for people to at least get that first step.
That's the language in the bylaws. So when people understand the language is you need to be a trade association membership, which of course I don't necessarily agree with. Now Jamie and I have been friends for years, and I just don't agree with any sort of monopoly or sole proprietorship over what is or isn't a compassion club, even though I'm a member, one of the first 100 members of this club.
But it's not that, right? It's not that. Like, I understand what you're saying with that, but I mean, the thing for the trade membership is you have to follow 18 standards. And those are, if you're going to serve a minor, they better have medical documentation and legal guardian approval, right? If you're going to sell cannabis, you better really simple, basic things that if you are going to say you're a medical dispensary at all, you have to be doing those things, right? If you're not doing those, you're being completely irresponsible to patients.
I understand the need in this, just so we're fair, and so everybody watching this understands, I support the fact that we need to have a compassionate model and have it properly AGM'd and have proper nonprofit status. At the same time, I don't agree with any sort of additional licensing over top of what the city's already charging, say $1,000. Well, then does it not give you also the ability to up your membership prices as they continue to regulate across the country?
The point, Jason, though, is it's really not about that, and we don't want it to be about that, right?
Well, that's what a lot of people are afraid of and trying to figure out. So I'm trying to get it from the lion's mouth. So what you can speak to the viewers, because I'm just feeding back questions.
No, I'm trying to answer them. Again, for us, it's about accountability, and that other class of license you can apply for. There's nothing medical in it, right? Like, this is what I think people don't understand. In terms of the business license and the bylaws, that's the most the city can do. there's nothing in there about whether the pot that is being sold is moldy, whether the people there know anything about any medical conditions at all, right? In terms of patients, for patients to be able to know, which was the entire point of the CAMCD process in the first place.
Well, dignified access.
Well, and so that you know what you're getting. So then if you go to a dispensary that has the CAMCD trade membership on it, you know there's a certain 18 standards that are being followed. And if they're not, there's a place where you can follow up and complain. If and we will try and follow up if it's a serious issue, and we'll still look into that. If there is no sticker there, then you're taking their word for their standards, which is fine if you ask them. But a lot of patients don't get into everything. They don't ask when you sign up at a dispensary using your card at another dispensary. They don't say, what are you going to do with my information, for example, right? And that's like one of our standards.
That's one of the important
You can't
things.
be selling off patient information. Yeah. So these are like basic things that the city actually couldn't touch.
We're going to actually pick up on that. We got to go to commercial break. We're going to pick up on that when we get back because the patient solicitation and data banks that certain LPs have been trying to buy as well as a whole nother discussion. Anyway, stay tuned for more when we come back with Jamie Shaw, President of CMACD and BCCS spokesperson.
Welcome aboard the Extract Express. Justin Loizos, reporting with Cannabis in Canada. Here I'm with the Cannabis Rights Coalition, taking the Extract Express on another adventure. This time we're taking it out to London for a fundraiser to try and save our gardens. So we're loaded up here with a lot of great things. I'm enjoying it. We're having a good time. We're just getting started.
Our mission and our goal was to really be a vital part of the community and provide an essential service for the medical community.
First of all, I would just like to say thank you for putting on this great event. And right now, the Cannabis Rights Coalition looks like they have the government up against the wall.
I'll be damned if anybody's gonna go to jail for growing and smoking their own medicine.
You have to stand up. If you just sit back in your house and medicate, it's not gonna change anything. So you have to have your voice heard.
We're having a great time and educating, and raising funds and awareness for the fight to save our gardens. Then I know how important the coalition is to me, to the thousands of members that we represent and that are protected by this injunction that we're fighting for every day.
Welcome back to Cannabis Canada with Jason Wilcox. We've got Patrick here, and of course Chad Jockett in the house.
It's been a great event. It's been really busy. This is how the event started. I was blowing glass with some friends on a beautiful property, and I said, man, wouldn't it be amazing to blow glass with a live band? Let's invite a few more friends over, and we'll have a party.
Wonderful people. Everybody's always having a great time at your events, and all these cannabis events. Beautiful, beautiful people everywhere.
I can't get used to how peaceful it is out here. You put on such a good thing, fighting cannabis causes, fighting for liberty. What's your closing remarks this year on just the facts of liberty and the climax, I guess, that we're at right now with medical marijuana and cannabis in general going into 2015 elections?
I think we're going to see the NDP surge ahead as far as politically with Justin's unfortunate stance with the C-51 and just made him look like a weak political leader, I think.
Nothing's helped us legally other than the courts, you know, when it comes to the right to liberty.
in this country. And it means the only thing we got is the Constitution, and indeed Harper's stomping on it.
Screw the Constitution. We got ourselves, we got our voice, we got our beings, we got our movement. We're all going to meet still Cannabis Day. We're going to be at that art gallery. I don't care what people say. See, I can't gather there and sell a medical delivery device. Well, watch us.
All right, well, once again, brother, thanks again. This is 2015 Great Canadian Glass Gathering.
Got it.
Boom. Peace, brother. Yeah, peace out.
Very strange how this creature goes right for this cannabis plant. Little does it know it needs a license. It's not threatened at all by government bureaucracy. I believe they call this species the chicken. Wow. What a brave beast this is. The chicken.
All right, welcome back, and we are here, and I am continuing to have my joint, and we're just going to carry on. Now, we picked up a few questions from the audience, and not online, but it's in the chat, and I wanted to mention that Dana Larson is headed for the Board of Variance as well to request that his dispensaries be exempt from certain aspects of the regulation. I'm not sure exactly which aspects. I'm not going to speak for Dana, but maybe he can pop that up in the chat and feed it through to us. But you know, a lot of people are certainly wondering, because these are certainly the clubs we named. We named Eden's, we named yourself, and we named Dana's from our source. And of course, we're going to stand by that until we see how this plays out. So
I hope you're right.
yeah, on that note, with the question from the audience now from Budzilla here, which is another dispensary, and we, of course, one we heavily support. They're really standing their ground. One of the gentlemen who got maced, I believe. Yeah. So it says here, what does Jamie think of the bars on the for either bars or I don't think it's bars, is it not, that glass?
That's one thing that I never really entirely understood. There's a couple issues here. One thing with the clouded glass, that has always kind of struck me as a little strange, but this is one of the reasons why also it's good to have something finally in writing. Because our understanding is that newer dispensaries were being told by the police that the easiest way to make sure their product wasn't seen from the outside was to cloud the glass. And so a lot of them were choosing to do that. And then, of course, in the media, people were making fun of dispensaries for having the clouded glass. So that was kind of weird. So hopefully that's sorted out now a little bit. Of course, it means they all have to redo their windows again. The bar thing was weird. There was like a millimeter. It was like they couldn't be less than like 55 millimeters or something. I can't remember what it was. It was weird.
Oh, the bar spacing, you mean?
Yeah, the only thing I can really think of is, I mean, I think that's to appease the business improvement associations. I think they don't
Or is it just to add more cost?
They didn't want the roll down shutters. They didn't want the, well, I think that's the thing. If they can make the business improvement association.
This is the thing I don't understand, because Dana, if you're watching, you made a comment that you once wanted to see this to be like coffee shops, and let's just see how the market evolves. So I'm just wondering, is this the same sort of thing that CAMCD thought that they would see evolving as we see these heavy regulations, restrictions, and crackdown on 94 dispensaries, that how many crews, how many clippers, jobs, how many people supply, these clubs that ultimately supply the patients. But if they were to all lose their jobs, what would happen to the BC economy if Tilray or somebody else took over that market?
Well, Tilray just laid off a bunch of people, so I don't know if they're looking to hire anybody at the moment. Leafly might be.
Leafly is Tilray if you follow the money.
I know, privateer holdings.
Exactly.
No, the thing is, one of the things, again, like I was mentioning earlier with the CAMCD regulations, we said things like, you've got to have security features. We didn't necessarily say 33 millimeters or so many centimeters from wherever. We didn't tell people how to do that. We do have to not only take care of patients, but people that work in the industry as well. We do know of one or two locations that are sometimes very understaffed and don't seem to have a lot of security. I think those get picked off pretty quickly. When we heard about the robbery, for example, not the ones with the cars driving through the windows, but there was a robbery earlier in the year, and I think, it is a target, as anything is in this economy. So
well, to be fair,
you need to have some security.
We do need to have security. We do need to have some sort of common sense regulations. But I think what the city's doing is really excessive. Even if they drop this down to $1,000, it is a little excessive when you're forcing certain people to move and comply.
Well, that is causing a problem for sure. Especially, it's a lot of chaos if you're causing everybody to move and everybody's got to move into the same place.
Does the culture, does it not? Does it sort of like split the voice? Because right now there's people thinking, well, if I go with
There's girls involved too,
I just say people.
Yeah.
With people involved, exactly. There is man, I've met so many women growers that are just outstanding. It's phenomenal. That's the thing about this culture that we love.
You should come to the next Women Grow event. It's been
I've been getting a lot of those emails.
We're the only chapter in Canada, and the vice chair of that, Shiga Amala, is the founding chair, and
hey, I support the woman's voice as anybody else. Anybody who loves cannabis, I love them. Other than the monopoly that feels they can buy us and control us, and that's what I'm concerned about. The people you right, like you said, your position. I'm assuming your position is you're going to stand by your.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's not only. From the very beginning, we've been asking for the government to regulate something that works for patients. Every time they do, we look at it and we say, no, that doesn't work. And we tell them exactly why, and they don't listen to us. And then the courts tell them a few years later, and then they have to change the program, and it happens again. So for us, if they designed a system that worked as well as dispensaries, the BC Compassion Club would close. If we didn't need to be there anymore, if other people were offering our services and it wasn't a problem for patients, then we would close and go away. We're not seeing that. We're not seeing that really anywhere. It's the opposite. If you look at Washington State, there's a lot of parallels down there with what's going on up here right now, where they've got these old medical dispensaries that served authorized medical patients, and they're being shut down and forced to close because they've never been regulated.
But is that not in favor of marijuana ink dispensing, which is very similar to LP dispensing?
Exactly. So the recreational dispensaries, whereas Colorado did something similar, but they used those dispensaries that were already there serving medical patients, and then said, here's an extra tax for people that aren't using it as medicine. That's simple, it's logical, it makes the most sense, really, other than a wholly two-tier system, which also would have some benefits. Yeah. For us, it's our members would not have been served by the MMPR. They just wouldn't. They can't afford to buy a month's supply of medicine all at once. They can't afford to buy a 5-gram minimum of something. They can't afford to risk trying new strains based off of THC and CBD alone when they've tried through trial and error for years and figured out exactly what strains work for them and know what genetics usually will work as well.
And as we discussed, and we were discussing this off camera, now I've spoken about this for so many years, 7 years, plant genetics. I spoke about this on the 2005 National Committee with Phil Lucas and Rial Kapler, the CAS National Committee. It comes down to plant genetics versus human genetics. And every time plant A and B is crossed, you get plant C. It's like a new baby. Those are new genetics that nobody should have the right to govern. And I think that the federal government of Canada and their friends continue to try and govern marijuana, as they call it, as a gun.
Well, it's a mistake we make with everything, right? Carrots used to be almost every color except orange. Back in about the 17th century, they all suddenly became orange in Holland. That happens to love orange. There's the Protestant ties and things like that. But there's this monoculture idea that I think we've learned over and over is a mistake. There's a guy in Vermont that grows I think it's 400 different varieties of heirloom apples, which I didn't even know there were that many kinds of apples in the world. I can think of maybe 5 or 6 different kinds of apples. And I think that it's about diversity, right? And diversity is good for health. Diversity in diet, diversity in genetics, diversity in everything is healthy. So hopefully this whole monolithic idea of we contains everything like that doesn't work. That's not reality.
Well, that goes back to my problem with the regulations. Not only that the LPs get everything over R versus Smith and still don't want to kick up any money to pay for it. Anyway, they stand to benefit out of this, but patients are now restricted from how they get to choose their extracts. And I think that that is another Section 1 reasonable access argument. Section 7 test has already been met, and I think it's just a matter of raising another $250,000 and unfortunately going through the courts unless we get some sensible politician up there that can do something about this. And my friends, Bill C-10, understand what a mandatory minimum means. You can be fresh back from Afghanistan, legs blowing off, and whatever, you know, be a war hero. You still do time if you have X number of plants. Extracts that are made with chemicals.
And you have to reaffirm every year that your legs are still gone.
Exactly. You have to reaffirm that you're still sick. Like me, I've been 22 years with HIV and I still have to reaffirm it all the time that I'm still terminally ill. Terminal means terminal, guys. So in my case. So it's something that I've never liked. I've never liked the old system.
That's another big thing for the BC Compassion Club, and I would imagine a lot of the other older dispensaries as well. A lot of our members are palliative, frankly, and can't wait 2 weeks for a mail package to arrive to tell them to. A lot of them don't have that long, actually, right? And so that's actually probably the biggest demographic of growth that we've seen recently, is people that are extremely palliative and far along in that process.
And that's who I fight for. Talking about, but this all goes on now. Right now, the patients are who I care about. The people in the wheelchairs that don't have to rely on Granville or Hastings Street dealers or calling up some local dealer or forcing people back underground to be threatened because they're transporting. They're picking up from a dealer that's illegal, even though they're legal. It's a very messed up system.
That's exactly why Toronto Compassion Center, Cannabis is Living Medicine, Montreal Cannabis Access,
that's Boris,
MedCan
right?
Access. No, that was there was clubs in Montreal. That was Adams Club. There was the club in Guelph. That was Rade's Club. And those were, there was MCAS in Toronto, which was Blaine's Club. And then, of course, Neve and Dana. And at that time, it was Stephen over at. It's really been a lot of Dieter's work on the island that's been really good and coming along. And that's what we're there for, right? Like, that's
speaking
why
of Dieter,
we're
now
there,
I've seen
for the
Dieter.
patients.
I watched Dieter up on stage there with Hillary and Brett Settle and Mr. Lucas. You know, I've seen them up there, and this is my concern. You go to these conferences and you see the same people, and you see them using language like we need to regulate and control. No, but there was a little bit of language used there that was very similar to the LPs and talking about these weird pneumonias you can all of a sudden get from cannabis. It's like, when did us Compassion Club start preaching that you can get sick from cannabis? Wasn't it supposed to be safe and effective medicine?
I don't remember what he's talked about, but if you smoke moldy cannabis, that isn't safe, right?
Well, yes. He was just making that suggestion.
This is the whole point, right? You talked about some people that maybe of less desirable character that you don't want patients going to buy from, and we think that if that type of person opens a store, we still don't want patients going there. Anybody else can choose to go there if they want to, but for us, that's really what it's about. And when you leave,
to be fair,
when the government leaves a hole like this, what you're actually doing is encouraging people that don't have good motivations. With all of the earliest clubs, with yourself, your own activists' work, what it is you're forced into that position by your conscience. You can't actually just let this happen, right? And that brings a certain type of person to the industry, a certain
active work as a compassion club. In your 18 years, have you ever seen somebody get pneumonia from using cannabis?
From moldy cannabis,
You've
that's what I mean,
seen them
right?
get
And that's
pneumonia?
with the Health Canada thing.
No, but have you seen them from BCCS get pneumonia?
No, of course not. We
Okay.
hardly ever even have any complaints, and when we do, we go and look it up. There's quality control measures.
The reason
right?
I'm just playing devil's. Absolutely. Myself, as a 22-year compromised individual, compromised immune system, I've never gotten sick from growing cannabis or many of the dispensaries, many of the people I've shared with across this great nation. I've never gotten sick. The studies say there's no lethal dose rate. It's no more addictive. I mean, in fact, caffeine's more addictive than cannabis. And, you know,
But if you're talking about something with mold on it, that is a different issue.
Again, but this is what,
right?
like Kurt Tussall said, now, let's be straight here. Let's be fair. If you had moldy bread, what do?
Normally, you would throw it out.
Okay,
but do
so
you actually know to recognize that? Like, I heard a story recently where somebody had found a piece of hash that they had left there ages ago and didn't know, thought, oh, great, I found more medicine, and then they got very sick because, so you do have to worry about that. Down on the east side, I never thought I would see.
Maybe we should do a book for stoners or something.
Totally. Well, you know what? Do you remember the whole fentanyl thing that happened?
Yeah.
I always thought that that was a prohibitionist joke. Why would anybody add another drug to cannabis, right? It makes no sense to me. But then somebody was doing it on the downtown east side, and it was killing people.
I'm still not sure how they would do it, because my understanding is fentanyl comes on a patch. I don't know how you would put a patch on cannabis.
Well, I'm sure you could liquefy it and soak it or something. Who knows?
Who knows?
Right? Just
it's crazy.
powder on it.
Or it could be more prohibitionist hype to be able to protect the kids from the cannabis that's dangerous.
Or it could be somebody who thought there was an opportunity, right? Like that's why you do actually need some sort of regulations. They shouldn't be overly restrictive, but you need some.
So now with this monopoly that's coming in that we've went to, I've seen you at the same conferences, we've heard what they've had to say. Do you believe that this monopoly that's coming in actually shares our traditional values that we share in the cannabis culture?
Licensed producers?
Yeah, are they coming in with the same sort of values?
Not. Of course not. It's it was meant to appeal to a different market. As I said, there were some people in this industry and in this movement that thought maybe get in there and help it along and fix its problems. But I don't think that's the majority. I don't think that's really what it was created for. It seems to really it's led to a lot of stock market speculation. I'm sure that there are people in there other than that came from our industry that also have really good intentions. But it's a flawed system basically from the beginning. And it's, again, mistakes we've learned in other things. Publicly trading medical companies, maybe not the greatest idea, right? You want people to be accountable to somebody more than shareholders.
Yeah. Well, I notice the city likes to throw around that word medical a lot, and once again, ill-informed that Canada holds there's no medical value to marijuana, as Rona likes to so well point out. And I've said here on Cannabis in Canada for 7 years.
And the city of Vancouver agrees with you.
Yes,
Yeah.
you know, I've actually, the ridiculous, the hypocrisy in it, they've set up a multi-billion-dollar industry around us, and it's set up for legalization. Mr. Conroy was sitting right where you are, and I asked him point blank, and he said, no, it's clearly set up for long-term legalization. So, you know, this whole thing about medical, it's a sham. My concern is, now the provocation on Cannabis Day was to fence off the back of the art gallery, tell the activists and the leadership that, hey, it's because of construction. So we went ahead and moved it to the front peacefully. Then they surrounded it with the front with young gang squad, young tough officers, not the standard officers that we see every year that are the older ones that just kind of casually go through the crowd, but really aggressive and provocative. And that led, of course, to what, for the first time ever in my years of attending these events, seeing my friends pepper sprayed. And
it was an escalation, I think, that had started already in the media probably a week or so before, right? It might actually still be a leftover from April. The city and the organizers have been kind of going back and forth on things, so it's hopefully they can figure things out, because yes, it's been a peaceful event. How can the city on one hand say that they want to look after medical patients and then stomp on Cannabis Day, which is in its roots a medical holiday that we started because 420 was all about legalization. So we started a Cannabis Day. And that was honestly in its roots, and it just grew from there. So they say, yeah, well, we want to stop it. Yeah, who can stomp on the charter, Section 2, right to assemble peacefully? I mean, but wasn't there like a week of talking about could they move it? Could they do, like there wasn't there conversations going on that could have avoided this had they actually like...
The facilitators returned the money of the tent owners, and they know that, and then we did everything we could. What we didn't stand for was an absolute shutdown of our event with only 20 days notice. And myself and other people that were on the front lines in the morning between 8 and basically 1, when the real battle was going on, stood our ground, popped our tents up, did our dabs, and what provoked the police finally, a few times we had to engage, and we had to engage the city engineer who wanted to say we couldn't put our tents up, told him to beat it because Section 2 right to assemble. Talked to the police as well, asked them to stop provocating, because they kept coming in the crowd with their camera and using their facial recognition stuff. You know, and it's like I said to them, guys, stop provocating. Tell your friends up on the 3rd floor to zoom in, but stop doing this. Go back to the freaking, go back to the perimeter where you belong. We don't cross their line. We know not to.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is, like I said, this is a lot of, I've heard stories of I wasn't there that day, but I've heard a lot of stories from different people that were, none on their side, so I have no idea what was going on over there, but there were different accounts of smoke being blown in an officer's face, things like that, so it's like, I don't know.
Why was the officer within the smoke range?
Well, who knows? I don't know. I wasn't
This is
there.
what-
I
this
have
is
no
what-
idea,
this is what
right?
I'm
I don't
saying.
know if the smoke
But
came from
I
across
was
the
there. I
square
mean,
or from like 2
I
inches
was
away.
there.
I
They
don't know.
surrounded my tent. I had 2 officers on each side of me. There was a bunch of them watching, and we popped their tent up. I was
Yeah.
prepared to go to jail
Yeah.
because, again, my right to assemble.
But you said earlier they left you alone on there. They were
They
fine.
walked right by the coalition tent, and
Right.
again, I point this out to people.
So
you
it was
know,
the selling really that.
well, no, because they
seemed to
went
be-
right over to the other poor guy. It was one single guy setting up his tent and tried to tell him to shut down. But all the activists just followed him along and followed their whole little party of police that was there to protect the city engineers. Like, they need protection from us. All we did was stand our ground. You know, that was it. But the mace is what really made me upset and led us to go into the mayor's office. Neil had his own reasons for going there, but my issue was friends of mine got maced at a peaceful assembly. And that's simply not right. And the militarization of the police. And the very next day, you took the fence down. You lied to us. You could have made this better, and it could have got a lot uglier. I'm just glad what happened early, and the police decided to be sensible. And the day happened, and I think 5,000 or 10,000 people still showed up. I wasn't there. I had to. I was there for the morning, and then had to take off for the afternoon. But apparently, everything went off well in the afternoon. So that's an example of holding our ground. But I still want to find out who paid for the police, why they provocated it, and it just adds more to what's really going on.
Yeah.
Like we have to agree, if there's a monopoly reaching its hands in, going to affect people moving, people can apply for this board of variance. But the reality is, and like we've demonstrated on cannabiscanada.ca with our map, they knock each other out. 75% of the clubs or so or more knock each other out.
Yeah.
So unless they fall into a certain model, or if they're inside a certain way, that's once again, it just kind of lends to my fear of the monopoly. And I'm glad to hear you speak like this, because you are the president of the CAMCD, and it puts to rest a lot of the dispensary owners who are saying, what's your real agenda, and how did you get in with that particular link with the city? And of course, with the BCCS's history, it would make sense why you'd be talking with the city.
Well, and I made it my mission for 2 years to make the city do something, right?
Yeah.
You can't really tell politicians what to do so much. You can tell them that they need to fix something.
Well, I remember the last time you were in the studios, I did ask you, did you have any prior stakeholder advisory about these regulations coming into effect? I asked Dana,
Not about the
I asked
regulations
Don.
themselves, other than just we said you need to regulate, right?
Yeah.
And then that was it. Other than
But
us
they didn't
continually
advise
bugging them, right?
Yeah.
Going, you got to license dispensaries, you got to do this, right? So that was it. Once they had kind of made the decision, we didn't know that. And then when staff kind of announced that they had a whole plan, we knew nothing about any of that, right? So.
Yeah, well, that's what we've heard too, is that a lot of it was staff and a lot of
Yeah.
it was decided, and we're just trying to get to the bottom of it and know exactly what's going on. Because the one thing I know is that, and I'm going to call it now, 5 years from now, I believe clubs are going to be forced by compliance to sell LP cannabis or shut down and face Bill C-10. You know,
We may have
these
a
are
totally
serious
new
issues.
model come October, right? Like we may, we might have.
Well, I don't think Justin Trudeau is going to save us.
Oh,
His
it's
chief
not even
financial
that,
officer,
right? Frankly,
his chief
it's-
financial officer is well set into the LP.
Absolutely, but there's going to be a possibility of discussion again, and not just with Trudeau, with either Trudeau, Elizabeth May, Thomas Mulcair, anybody. There will be a conversation again. There has been no conversation.
Can we agree that
and
they're going to
that's the
legalize?
problem.
Can we agree that they're going to legalize for the money? I'm sure you and I could at least agree that no matter what, whoever the governing party is, guys, they're going to legalize for the money, not for our hard work, not for your love of the medicine. They want to legalize for the money that's behind the plant that they call marijuana.
Our whole fight has always been about the medical. We're not against recreational at all, but we don't think people are going to like what any kind of recreational market really looks like. There's going to be taxes. There's going to be a lot of taxes. It's going to be regulated, right?
Well, look what we see in Colorado. Millions and millions of dollars being
Right,
made every
and-
month.
But at least, and this is the thing, at least Colorado's patients aren't paying those same types of taxes. In Washington, they talk about, well, they can give a discount on the tax, but it's actually already taxed every step of the process before it gets there at that extremely high rate. Not only that is, if it's a fully recreational market and it's not overly restrictive, then there will be people that will open up niches that deal with medical patients and deal with medical strains, and that'll still happen anyway. The problem is when you start regulating it with putting sin taxes on it, things like that that really don't make a lot of sense unless you're treating it like something like gambling or,
This lends me to my next question. So say the BCCS gets their permit and then says, okay, well, you're allowed to sell only oils or tinctures, but the federal regulations now stipulate they have to be in child-proof packaging. Are you going to comply to those orders?
Well, we're not an LP, thankfully.
No, you're not. But remember, it says anybody. It says LPs under Section 56.
Yeah.
At the same time, it just says in aspect of dispensing. So I'm sure that the city would. And again, the word compliance is just a strike of the pen. Tomorrow they could write in. You know what? You don't have to be 300 meters from each other. That's no longer a rule.
I will say this: the city of Vancouver has not one LP in it. Has never had one LP in it. I think the idea much against their greenest city idea. They are all about local gardens. They're all about communities. They're all about everything that dispensaries are and what the Health Canada system isn't, right? So I'm not sure if they're doing that wittingly or if that many of the laws have already been, they've got to work within framework. They have to work within what their abilities and what their powers are and what the existing laws are.
And that's my concern, is that the city, as I said it earlier, the city regulations, when they were proposed and we sat here, we were questioning why only oils. And I said to everybody, watch when R versus Smith legislation is handed down by the government. It's been handed down and it's the exact same as the city. Oils. This is all part of the same language and the same thing, and that word compliance. Now, my LP friends, there's 1,200 applicants still. I always said there was only going to be 51, and I feel sorry for some of them because they're on the run from creditors.
1,200 still, a lot have dropped out or pulled out at this point to get to that number, yeah.
And there's some of our friends, and some of our friends, at least mine anyway, I have friends that have lost their wives, they've lost their homes, they've lost their businesses, all because they wanted to help in a free and fair market. Something that the monopoly says no way.
Well, and that's not what that was, right? That was part of the problem. That's the system was designed to cause problems for everybody, not just the patients, but also the people actually trying to do the right thing. Yeah. It's a bit of a mess.
Yeah, well, it's a monopoly. I mean, it's again, to me, there's battle lines drawn, and what I'm trying to figure out is where are people at for BC's economy, for our brand, for our name, what we built. And we've been at this for so many years. We've helped so many patients, and we understand the medical efficacies and the need for that frontline service, as you so well put. And we also the need for plants and the different genetics to continue to be explored and researched. But at the same time, not to be governed like a gun by Tilray or Tweed or these guys up here that says, bar, rah, rah, you got to do this in child-proof packaging. And I'm just afraid that that's going to twiddle down to the city compliance. That, again, the government's very good at creating a problem. So they said, well, we got a problem. There's 94 dispensaries and there's all these patients. Well, they're right. 50% of all federal licensees, that's 20,000 patients, reside in the province of British Columbia. That's a very big issue. So when we look at this from what they're doing, my biggest concern is, once again, patients are going to be displaced. And knowing who is going to take a stand when the monopoly comes in and makes that strike and it says, you have to now sell Tweed weed or Bedrocan or whatever, Bedrocan's now Tweed, so whatever, you end up having to sell licensed producer cannabis in order to meet compliance and keep your business license. Now, when that happens, how many people are going to conform to that? And of course, after a $250,000 investment, who would blame them?
Well, it's really hard to say because language is a tricky thing, right? So you'd actually have to see what the whole thing looked like. If they had changed quality control measures, if they changed things about how the LP product had to be produced, maybe that would be okay, right?
Well, that's what I mean with the strike. Again, that goes back to compliance.
Totally depends,
so with the LPs, with the strike of the word compliance, Health Canada tomorrow can say, okay, now guys, you can sell edibles. Once they have the stuff in place, or now guys, you can sell 100 milligram doses or 200 milligram doses. Once they have it in place. But right now it's just this monopoly over it, and they just took the rights away from patients like myself to make old school oil that I've been making since I was younger. But at the point of medicine and using it orally as a medicine, I make my own oil. But I use a chemical extraction, if you have it, using ISO. But it's the same thing Rick Simpson used to cure cancer. So how dare you guys try and tell me that that's reasonable limits? I say it's arbitrary on Section 1 of the Constitution, and I hope somebody challenges it.
It will get challenged for sure. I think sooner rather than later, I would imagine, the first opportunity. This is what I said. They changed the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act the day after to make that equivalent to a meth lab, right? Yep. Now equivalent to
and that's important. That's important, guys. When you look at Bill C-10, please look up Bill C-10 and read the language and understand what a meth lab means. And look at the mandatory minimums that come with it, and look at the amount of shatter you have because it goes by the weight. Now, please, my
Or
friends, because
cookies.
I don't want to see any friends, family, or anybody else go to jail because they've been watching. The LPs consider us competition. There is a war for supply and distribution going on in this country, and all of us are trying to figure it out. And thank God, Jamie, you've come in and you've actually straightened it out from CAMCD's side as a spokesperson, saying that you're going to stand by, you know, the BC economy, stand by your crews. As you know, they supply their families. They look after themselves. And yeah, they should be paying taxes, and we can do that. But
Yes.
we cannot shut down this free and fair market that exists in BC, and you can't buy our brand name.
The
people own
saddest
it.
thing to me in all of this is the knowledge that keeps getting forcibly lost or pushed out of the system. The amount of people that have been growing in British Columbia specifically for patients and different conditions, it's a lot. And the experience that they've gained doing it is invaluable. The amount of people that have worked at Vancouver Dispensary and BCCS that have dealt with patients on a daily basis, that kind of knowledge you don't just get out of nowhere. There's no school, there's no, right? So it's the same thing with the edibles, with the oil producers. It's everybody that knows how to do it isn't really being allowed to do it.
Exactly.
And that the people that suffer the most from that are patients.
And that's what I'm getting back at. The LPs, Health Canada, you just hurt the patients again. You not only hurt it because you're restricting the clubs, but now you've restricted the patients. So even if they go to the club and they get oil, they have to, you're forcing them on a reasonable limit, which they have a constitutional right to use extracts. Unfortunately, we have to now take you back to court and challenge this. This is freaking ridiculous. It's like round robin with the MMA all over again.
Kirk said it. Kirk said,
I hope Kurt challenges. Kurt, if you're watching, I hope you challenge, brother. You know, and call up the coalition.
In his closing arguments, he said, you know, it's constantly going back to the courts. And he said you could fix it right now if you just removed it from the CDSA. They didn't do it, but now look, it's going to go back to the courts. So at least now they know. Kirk made that solution known to them very clearly.
Well, I can't believe. Actually, I can believe because I've watched them do it. Like when we won, they found it arbitrary that you couldn't have just one-to-one grow ratio. The government went and they changed it to a 1-to-2 ratio. It's like, are you kidding me? Or a 1-to-3 ratio? Sorry. Yeah, but that was it, and that was after a lot of debate. So it's like that's what they consider reasonable, and this is my fear in Allard. They're going to do the same thing. Allard's going to say you have a constitutional right to have a garden. Then they're going to throw the football back to the legislative arm, and the legislative arm is going to come back and say, oh well, you can have 6 plants in like Colorado, or you know you can maybe get 12 plants. And when you know what, we have to challenge it. Just like right now, my friends, we have to get an army together, start fundraising, get a couple of lawyers on this, and challenge this legislation if it's possible under reasonable access, because clearly the Section 7 test is already met when patients need to face mandatory minimums in jail being Bill C-10. Look this up. And once again, shame on Health Canada and shame on the LPs who sit back and continue to just say nothing. That's why nobody's coming to you. You know, if you look after the people you so-called want to serve, you might get a little further in your business venture. I'm sorry, I need to rant a little bit. This stuff just gets me going. But, you know, now, CAMCD moving forward, do you see any sort, like, what do you have to say to the clubs that may need to sign up? Because on the initial city application, it says nothing about signing up for CAMCD or are you a trade member. So what would you say to the people about how much does it cost them to sign up? What's the process? This is stuff I don't know, of course.
Well, the certification program is still the way that it's always been, but now there's a new first step. So in that certification program, there were 18 required organizational practices that everybody had to be doing. So we basically just pulled out those 18 and said, if you're doing those 18, you can be part of a trade association. So it allows them to kind of work together, but also kind of shows that those 18 basic things they're doing, and so they can show patients that.
So it's basically a union.
It's a trade association. That is,
it's a union.
So it's going to lobby for that.
It's another word basically for a union. To be fair.
Well, sort of. A union's a little different, right? It represents more workers than the industry itself. But
true, true. But it's association. That's good.
Yeah.
But this is again where, like, I just wish they had made it so they said, you know, a model like. You know,
well, that's
yours,
like I said, with our standards, it's the
questionable.
same thing. It's like you've got to be doing these things. Yeah. How you choose to do really regulate the product. Like this is
how are you?
Here's the perfect. That's of course not. But we're regulating an industry that's choosing to regulate if it wants to. That is also illegal, right? So it's like that's the whole issue in the first place. It's trying to find some accountability within that gray zone, right? While still being illegal, still making sure that patients aren't just being subjected subjected to just anything, right? To any
Well,
kind
this
of
is what,
business
as you
practice.
said, we
and
don't-
employees as well, right?
Yeah, well, we don't
So-
want patients on gamma processed weed, high overpriced weed, mail order weed they don't know information about. There's a lot of stuff that we don't want. Most importantly, we want patient option. Patient option means that you can grow it, you can go to a compassion club and get frontline service if you can afford their pricing, or you can choose to order from a federal LP if you live in Timbuktu nowhere,
And that's
where
where
you
we
can't
agree.
get anything.
Yeah.
I understand all this, but without reasonable access in a free and fair market, there's going to be a war in this country, at least in this province. I can promise you that. And that's the problem that we're having. And that's my fear. All the crews, all the families, the BC economy, forcing us back underground. If jail didn't deter us during the drug war, this ain't going to deter us now. So to me, that's where this all comes down to. And CAMCD taking that position makes me very comfortable, because then when I talk to some of my friends, I can say, well, no, here, watch this video. Here's what Jamie says.
And as I said, we don't actually want people joining us for business reasons. That's not what we want at all. We want people that are actually joining us because they actually care about those standards. They actually care about patient care. Yeah, if it just became another step in a business plan, that's not really so much for us. But frankly, it would probably be easier than trying to figure out how you're going to organize all these other extra wellness center services and things that they would have to organize in order to also get that Compassion Club license. So ultimately, unless you're already almost there, unless you're already almost that type of model, it doesn't really make a lot of sense for you to switch over, especially as I said, that fee will come down. And the other one, the Compassion Club one is so low, I don't see that one coming down any further, right? So, it might be a one-time fee, it might be a two-time fee, but if you're investing all this money in the healthcare services that we offer to try and get that savings, it's probably not going to be a savings. So,
and no one can take anything away from the BCCS. I mean, honestly, as a long-time
talking from
member.
CAMCD at this perspective, I mean, we want people to kind of, if they're going to open a dispensary in Vancouver, we want them to do what they want to do. Their vision of what it should be. We were concerned about some of these co-use rules, for example. There's a dispensary that we've been visiting recently that is beautiful. It's a little bakery in the front and a dispensary in the back, and it's a little family-run operation that was lovely. That we've heard there's one of like those up near Seashell or somewhere up
shops,
north.
yeah.
And it's a beautiful model that actually is probably not going to function under this regulation or without some tweaking. So, I mean, that's what we would like to see from CAMCD's perspective. And at the same time, if you're going to be a business, if you're going to sell a medicine, there should be quality standards. You should be following labor standards. We don't want
When we say
any
labor
employees
standards,
being...
that's scary. Labor standards would imply LP standards.
That's provincial labor law, right? So
Yeah,
if you
but-
go and
but
get a
who said-
job
but
and
who
you're
can
getting
set that?
paid, you have a minimum wage. You have to work overtime, right? Like that's important. We don't want dispensaries hiring people for $5 an hour.
At what point do our growers who are contracted actually start paying taxes and feel comfortable? I know there's a big law case and that you can't talk about that, but and I understand that may set the precedence for everybody at the same time.
Well, there's a few different things going on around that.
Well, for our people out there that supply all these other clubs and they're thinking about their families right now, and I know who you are and I've heard your voices, and they're looking at, hey, this ain't right, we want to do something.
That you get paid taxes? Or
the whole situation that's going up there. I'm getting completely spun out here. We're just running all overtime here. Sorry.
No
I'm gonna
problem.
jump into this. It was a tax related issue, but I'm gonna get into this with another question from the audience. Come August 24th, we have to stop baking. What is CMA or the CMACD position on this? So officially, I guess, what's your position on one, patients not being able to bake, and also the dispensaries that you want to represent not being able to bake? What would you say to them?
Mostly, on this issue, I would have to kind of speak for the BC Compassion Club mostly, but it aligns. We are going to try and take care of our members, right? We know if there's people that use edibles, we're going to try and find a way so that we're still in compliance with the city, but they're still getting their edibles. So it may mean hiring people that are in the same position as our compassionate growers to be compassionate
bake show right
bakers.
here on CannabisInCanada.ca.
Exactly, like that's our goal is the patients.
Patients still shouldn't have to bake, but that's good that you're gonna
we'll figure out something somehow. And CAMCD, I would imagine, is the same way. We have actually been working with a few edible producers that are also looking at some edible guidelines. So hopefully we'll be able to announce something.
I was just going to say, will you be releasing a position paper that will?
Well, we did during the public hearings, and it's basically the San Francisco bylaws for the most part, which just means if you're going to make edibles for sale, you've got to be food safe certified.
Clearly,
right? You have to list what the amount of cannabis is in it, not anything else. Be sold in a clear package so that you can see what it is when you're buying it, and it should leave the store in a non-clear package so that nobody can see what you have, right? Those are very simple, they're very safe, and so that was mostly what we're kind of basing ours around. Are those, but we're also working, like I said, with some other people that are edible producers that have some of their own ideas as well, because they've been working at it from a different angle. So we'll, knock our heads together and try and figure out what's going to work.
The one thing I love about the BC culture and again the Canadian cannabis culture is we're very improvised in how we learn to get through the failed and flawed policy of the federal government, whether it was the MMAR regulations that were so-called medical or the marijuana for medical purposes regulations, so-called medical value. The hypocrisy again. I keep saying this because it drives me nuts. Now, another question here. People want to know, what does a security plan mean exactly? Like, what should it address if they're trying to look at laying out their security plan to meet compliance?
Well, you should have not in terms of compliance to the bylaws specifically, but you should have a safe. You should have an alarm system of some sort.
Well, a safe for personal stuff overnight, or a safe for your cannabis?
Yeah, for cannabis, it should be locked up somewhere. Also, there's going to be money on premises, right? So that you want your employees to be safe while they're there in a space. You want your members to be safe in the space, so you would take the same precautions any other business would.
So that's
that was worried about its safety.
Mag lock at the door, kind of check-in glass, or shatterproof glass at least on the window.
Yeah, that's actually what they've been asking for is a lot less than what most Toronto compassion clubs do, right?
Yeah.
Most Toronto compassion clubs and dispensaries have much stricter than here. But they need it more, right?
Well, they're still not regulated there. Now, what's CAMCD going to do for our dispensary owners that are potentially entrepreneurs that want to open up in Calgary? They said, I think it's Calgary, that they're moving to regulate dispensaries. I don't think that exists, but what's CAMCD's position?
Well, I mean, obviously, regulation is good. Over-regulation is bad.
What about implementation?
Regulation of some sort.
What about if you're trying to regulate something that doesn't exist, but you're actually really trying to implement LP clinics in dispensaries?
Well, that's what it was weird when I heard the Calgary thing. That's actually what it looked more like. It was going to be medical clinics more than dispensaries, which is kind of weird because that's not, I guess that's far enough on the other side of the Rockies towards the east that's the mentality. But here, that doesn't seem to be the way that people have actually been going. It's been more dispensaries and Burnaby mentioned that they were looking at it. North Vancouver, I think, mentioned they were looking at it. Victoria's actually been working on it, so they're very close to something. And then, of course, was it Kelowna that beat Kimberley that beat Vancouver to the punch and gave a dispensary license the day before Vancouver.
So I'm going to hit you with one more hard question.
Yeah.
Officially, CAMCD, will you not comply to an LP dispensing model forced on your membership?
Again, it would, if you're talking about as a supply situation, it would
where they
really
would force
on
compliance.
It would really depend on what those regulations look like, what their regulations look like at that point as well, right? Because
they would become laws, with compliance.
Right, but I mean, in terms of once you have regulations, there's changes and there's adjustments, and if they manage to change enough things that we actually thought that worked, then we'd have to look at it. Yeah. But I mean, that's not really, again, for us, what we're looking at is all of the oldest, the women's collective WHAM in California is going through fights now.
They do great work. Yeah.
They've been there as long as the BC Compassion Club. They're a collective of women that grow for patients, and they haven't caused anybody any problems. They've been a pillar in the community, just like you've said, and now they're having problems because they're going to have to close because regulations are coming in and they don't fit. Yeah. So what we're really seeing is what we're kind of seeing everywhere. You've got these little cottage industry movements starting up they're collective based, they're co-ops, you know, they're member run,
No
even when
co-ops.
they're not.
I've been telling everybody, co-ops, if you're looking to protect yourself,
But
start
that
your co-ops.
and that is what they start peeling back, right? And that's what gets peeled back, peeled back, peeled back, and it's no different than what we've seen in every other industry, unfortunately, right? It's
Well, we are seeing a pushback from the people. I'm just really glad that once again that CAMCD's official position. I know you can't, like for 5 years, you can't say. For me, this is my own. I'm going to go on record here once again and say my concern is that the monopoly is expanding into Vancouver. They produced a problem with 94 dispensaries. They've offered a solution, and the solution is to conform to CAMCD. Everything you've said, I would say great, provided they keep it a free and fair market. Now, if there's anything else going on, then I call foul. And as a spokesperson, I can't do anything except thank you for giving me your word and your position on
Thanks for
that.
having me,
And
man.
for everybody else, keep your eyes open to what's going on. Pay attention to that word compliance and understand exactly what it means in relation to potentially selling LP weed in a dispensary near you. Jamie Shaw, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for
and
having me.
yeah, stay tuned next week, Thursday, same time, same place. And I believe it's Red One from the Rascals who's going to be on the show. We'll see you
nice
then.
new studio.
Thank you.